Please join with me the responsive reading. You who have an eye for miracles, it is a mere dot, but already it is a flower. Good morning, Fountain Streeters. Good morning, wannabe Fountain Streeters. Good morning to those who just want to find out if they want to be wannabe Fountain Streeters. Even if you snuck in to discover why the heck anyone would want to be a Fountain Streeter, you're welcome as well. So just relax, put your shoes back on, and you may well find your answer. Spoiler alert, though, there's a strong possibility that you'll find you like the answer. But enough about you. I'm here to talk about me. My name is Don Wheeler, and I've been a card-carrying member of Fountain Street since November 2013. I've never said this in such a public place before, but my connection to Fountain Street got started because I was a racketeer. I wasn't proud of it because I wasn't very good at it. My racket was badminton. And one of the players was a member of the Fountain Street Singles Group. And she invited me to attend one of their bi-weekly services at Vitelli's Sports Bar. Now, contrary to what some of you want to find out may believe, Fountain Streeters don't lie in wait to drag unsuspecting candidates kicking and screaming into this den of iniquity. No one said a word about my going to church. They just talked about having coffee after church, about going out to breakfast after that. And it just sounded so friendly that one Sunday I just showed up. Now understand that I hadn't attended a church service for more than 50 years. That's not hyperbole, that's fact. I left the church of my upbringing because I was unwilling to continue attending a place that asked me to park my brain at the door and just accept everything that was said as gospel truth. But that first Sunday here, I couldn't believe how accepted I felt, how welcoming the congregation was, how comforting this sanctuary felt. I believe the greeter that morning said, just as I will say this morning, "This is Fountain Street, you belong here." That sounded nice, but it wasn't until Fred, AKA the Reverend Dr. Wooden, said in his sermon, "We're not here to save souls, but to grow souls." Then I knew it was true. I had found a new spiritual home, not to mention my future wife. I soon discovered that there were so many more truths that I had never imagined, truths that have expanded my horizons and enriched my life. In here, you will discover so many opportunities to learn, to serve, to be included, to make a difference. This is Fountain Street. Here you belong.
thank you very much for the why do I even bother sometimes? It's just marvelous what you're able to create in our midst, both of our choirs. And I thought, wow, we got to work it out that you're all three here again, all of you arranged and do something that just blows our hair back someday. That would just be fantastic. And this fifth great-grandson of Zachariah McIntyre is grateful for your evocation of the Irish and the Scottish and the Celtic legends. I've been to Loch Lomond. It's a lovely place. Go back if you can. I could smell the peat while you sang. Today, in this weekend, I should say, we come to the end of Passover. Yesterday was the last day being observed. It also happened to be Sabbath. So when I went to synagogue yesterday, it was a really long service. In fact, I left before it was over, which is not uncommon. It starts at 9:30 and it goes until 12:30. It's a lot of stuff that goes on, and one of the things that goes on in that service is the reading of the Torah and what is called the Haftarah. It doesn't mean half Torah. It's a prophetic reading, meaning from a book that is not in the Torah but in the prophetic literature, which includes this passage from Isaiah. Isaiah is a well-deserved famous prophet for both the Christian and Jewish traditions. And you'll recognize this portion whether you are Jewish or not, because it's part of the Christian legacy as well. From chapter 11 it reads, "But a shoot shall grow out of the stump of Jesse. A twig shall sprout from his stalk." You'll notice the nature images are all over the place today. "The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard lie down with the kid, the calf, the beast of prey and the fatling together, and a little child will herd them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion, like the ox, shall eat straw." This image became a very powerful part of a fellow named Hicks, who created a painting in America called The Peaceable Kingdom. And he painted it over and over again with slight variations. And it shows the ox and the ass and the lion all lying down in what could be the Hudson Valley at a time when America saw itself as not just the New World, but the Promised Land. It evokes images of hope. Meanwhile, on the other side of the word, Kung Fu Ji, of the ancient Chinese wisdom, we sometimes call him Confucius, wrote in The Great Learning, "Things have their root and their branches. Affairs have their end and their beginning. To know what is first and what is last will lead near to what is taught in The Great Learning. To know what is first and what is last." But as Jason reminded us, whatever is first will eventually be last. And the last is the prelude to the next first. For those who have been around for a few years, I've preached on this story before, but when I chose it, I forgot that I had done that. So I'm hoping you also forgot as well. But even if you did remember it, a good story does not mind being retold, because each story that's good has within it stuff that continues to inspire or engage or instruct. It may seem to some of you self-serving that I would use my own life experience as a scripture, so to speak, but I am taking strong precautions. For one, I always make it a point of sharing not my victories and triumphs, but my defeats and humblings. As someone pointed out, success has 1,000 fathers, but failure dies an orphan. We always run from failure, and yet failure is what teaches us more than success ever did. We tend to assume that when we succeed, it was natural and inevitable, but when we fail, we look back and say, why did that happen? So I always give you my failures, of which I have many, because if there is wisdom in failure, it is because of what Stephen McCraney said when he wrote, "The master is merely the person who has failed more times than the beginner has yet to try." And my list of failings are so long that this must make me a master in every sense of the word. Another precaution that I take when I use my own personal experience is to submit whatever I am referring to from my own life to greater wisdom, to sacred and secular texts. This morning, the mighty words of Isaiah are on my mind, and the words of Konghu Ji, and the words of Mary Oliver and others whom you will hear. So let's get on with it. It was a cold April day, unlike today, 27 years ago, and I remember that it was April, at least that it was the earliest part of spring, because when those of us who lived in New England remember that we were told that you can plant your peas no earlier than St. Patrick's Day, depending on the snow. Winter there, like it is here, is not tied to the calendar. Just because the vernal equinox comes doesn't mean the snow is gone. It can and does snow well into April. It can yet snow here, and I can remember more than one May snowstorm, as we have had here, that have arrived and demolished the tulips we were waiting so long to see. 27 years ago, there was still a bit of old snow clinging to the brown husks out in the field behind my house, behind our backyard. But mostly it was gone. There were just lashings here and there, and the soil wasn't frozen. That's important. We lived in a small raised ranch-style house in what is still called West Groton, Massachusetts. Groton itself was where I worked. West Groton was part of the town. We lived in West Groton because we could afford it. It was within earshot of what is and still is called the Squannacook River. Don't you love those Indian names? Squannacook River. And it was also within sight of the old Boston and Maine rail tracks. Our house lot was part of a large open expanse that ran to a tree line behind which were the train tracks and the river. But in the open expanse that ran parallel to those tracks, there used to be an airfield about 10 years ago before we were there. I know this is not of use to you, but we enjoyed noticing from time to time a private airplane would come down low and zoom off, apparently using the wrong chart. Our eldest son, Aaron, was an only child at that point, and he was not quite 4, being born in May. He and I spent a lot of time together in our family room in our basement, where his toys and the television and my desk all were living, along with Fifi the gerbil. Fifi was part of Wendy's classroom when she was a teacher and had come home the previous summer and somehow never went back to school. That meant that random squeaking and scratching were often mixed in with Mr. Rogers in the morning and Tom Brokaw in the evening. That day, I'm remembering, was a Saturday. It was busy with household chores, and so we didn't notice for some time that Fifi was very quiet, no squeaking. I think I was over at her cage to change the water when I noticed that she was lying down and she was not breathing. Aaron was playing nearby, but absorbed in his play, and so not paying attention to what I was doing. So I went upstairs to Wendy, and we agreed this was a teachable moment to introduce the basics of death to a young person. So I called Aaron over to the cage and pointed out that Fifi was lying very still. And then I said, "She's dead," which looks like sleeping, but she won't wake up. Remember, he's not quite 4. We're not going to get very deep into this. But he did have a kind of serious look upon his face. It was a puzzle. And I poked her gently to prove she wouldn't wake up. "See," I said, "she's not waking up." Then Aaron wanted to touch her, and I think he sensed the slightly stiffened body that was not the gerbil he knew. Toddlers, of course, don't want to have deep conversations. So we knew the best thing to do was we should do something. And so I said, "Let's bury her. We will dig a hole in the ground and we'll put her in the hole. That's what we do when something dies." So we put on our coats and our shoes, and we got the shovel, and we put Fifi, I think, into a paper cup, and we marched out into the cold gray day behind the lawn in our backyard. Just beyond there in the brush, I poked the shovel into the dirt and dug a hole about 10 inches wide, about 10 inches deep, the width of a spade. Nothing special, after all. It's just a gerbil. Well, we bent down and we kind of poured the corpse into the hole, then put the dirt back and patted it on top, and then we stood up and took a deep breath, just a pause, nothing formal, but more than just throwing something out. And then I said, Aaron, let's say we go plant some peas since we have the shovel ready. We had a little vegetable patch from last year. Pastor, father, and teacher, mother saw this as a moment to do the whole circle of life thing, We had a little garden a few yards away, and so we took ourselves over there, and we dug a little trench where we had dug it last year, and we put the peas in the long trench. Is there anything more adorable in the world than a toddler squatting down, dropping peas into a trench one after another? But then we covered the trench with dirt, and then my wife said, we need to water them, of course, and so we filled up the big watering can, and Aaron watched as I poured the drops along the trench, and then he said, can we water Fifi too? If we surrendered to Earth's intelligence, we could rise uprooted like trees. Those are words of Rainer Maria Rilke, the German poet of the 20th century. Let me read them to you again and go on. If we surrendered to Earth's intelligence, we could rise uprooted like trees. I think Aaron knew this already. The poet goes on. Instead, we entangle ourselves in knots of our own making and struggle lonely and confused. So, like children, we begin again. In the gray light of a cloudy April day, my son, not yet 4, made me begin again. Is there really any difference between planting peas and dead gerbils? They are exactly the same act. You dig a hole, you put something in, you cover it with dirt. And if one waters the peas, should not one water the gerbil as well? Aaron saw the essential sameness of burying and planting, something we entangled adults often do not. And I thought, what else did I not see? As I mentioned last week, this has been a spring that has had many deaths. We've had 3 in less than a month. With them come rituals that are older than religions themselves. In a book of readings I've used for 35 years, I resort often to a story of the anthropologist in Africa. Remember, anthropologists, smart, who had asked the native bushman why he sat next to the corpse of someone newly deceased. And the bushman answered simply, "He is our person, whom we love." So much for civilization. In Judaism, it is customary never to leave a corpse alone until it is buried. It would be disrespectful. You need to know this because after September 11th, a group of Jews gathered near the tent where human fragments were being gathered from the rubble. They arranged that there would always be a Jew outside the tent, reciting the Psalms, keeping vigil for the dead who have yet to be buried. And once more, including this week, I have stood beside the body of someone I knew and loved, put my pastoral hand on her forehead, felt its dwindling warmth. Why do we do these things? Because she was our person, whom we loved. I think birth and death are the ends of the rope that we use to entangle ourselves, to tie into knots. But birth and death are at the ends of that rope, so we cannot tie them into knots when we reach them. We can only hang on. And we are turned to children if we let ourselves. We are allowed to begin again if we allow ourselves. Almost 4 years earlier than Fifi died, there I was with my newborn son, Aaron, fresh out of the womb. He was lying on the bed as Wendy was getting ready to take us home. And if you know a newborn, it's really red and wrinkled as though it were trying to unpack itself from being inside of a container for too long. And of course, it doesn't know its muscles, so it squirms very slowly, trying to find out which way its limbs go. And as I lay on my side beside him, I was entranced. I found myself pursing my lips in imitation of his as he was reaching to find the world with his mouth. I have to tell you, I love my wife desperately. We will cling to each other until life itself is gone, but I have never been so entranced by another human being as I was by that infant child lying next to me. My shoulder still remembers what his infant weight felt like as I put him there later. I remember how his head could fit beneath my chin. So every baby I pick up now becomes that newborn again for me. And yet further back, I can remember being held by my parents. Maybe not that young, but I have this distinct memory of my father carrying me sleepily from the car, of leaning against my mother's shoulder on a scary night. We become children again when we dare to let the realities of life in. I go down to the shore in the morning, says poet Mary Oliver, and depending on the hour, the waves are rolling in or moving out. And I say, oh, I am miserable. What should I do? And the sea says, excuse me, in its lovely voice, I have work to do. You know the feeling. When you realize your own individual human miseries and struggles really are rather tiny compared to the sea and the sky and the earth. Obviously, a word that I use with great care. Aaron saw that watering was what you did when you put something in the ground. That was part of the work. Then I realized that perhaps our deepest ancestors buried their dead not because it was the sanitary thing to do. They buried them because they hoped they would grow back. That thought struck me like a blow across my face 27 years ago as I poured water onto the grave of the gerbil and wondered whether it might actually happen. That sometime, at some point, some little creature would poke its nose above the ground and come leaping out like we are all supposed to do when the Christian gospel comes true. Something so simple and obvious that I felt like a dolt for not seeing it before. Yes, we bury our dead because we hope someday they will come back to us. It may be vain, it may be foolish, it is certainly childish, but we do feel it, don't we? A hope beyond all reason. A toddler had to show me that we plant our dead because we plant seeds, hoping they will come back. Why? Because she was our person whom we loved. Back when we lived without supermarkets or automobiles or electric lights, I think we saw more easily that we live in the world, not alongside it. Our days began with dawn and ended with dusk. Our food was nearby, but we had to either catch it or grow it. The living and the dead were never far apart. We put our ancestors in the ground near the house. While I do not wish to return to those times, they were hard. I think we paid a much higher price than we realize. Life and death are separate for us now in ways they never were before and really aren't anywhere else except for us. In fact, I'm the rare one these days who holds both corpses and newborns, who has carried coffins and babies and will. We know who are privileged, honored, and burdened with the task of birth and death. The truth of the writer Ursula Le Guin, who, after muddying the borders of gender, pushed on our thoughts about death when she wrote, "There are souls whose umbilicus has never been cut. They never got weaned from the universe. They do not understand death as an enemy. They look forward to rotting and turning into humus." What a curious thought. Are we weaned from the universe? Have we been cut away from reality so much that we think of death as the enemy? I think we have. Aren't we told to rage against the dying of the light? Thank you, Dylan Thomas, for that beautiful poem. I know I feel that rage within me. Every time I feel the decline of my physical reality, I feel the approach of death, and it's winking at me now. I am in its crosshairs, to be sure. But must I feel this is the adversary? Is this the price we have to pay for being human? Why cannot we long for death as we long for life, to welcome it as we welcome our mothers or our children? I don't know. But it does seem to me that there is something larger than life and death. They are not adversaries. They are part of the Mobius strip of reality that is both and at the same time. There needs to be, there must be, I hope there is something that contains them both. And that has been my hope for most of my life. A shoot shall grow out of the stump of Jesse, says Isaiah. A twig shall sprout from his stalk. It comes from that notion that even after you cut down the tree, sometimes there's enough life in it that it will come back. You've seen it. You know it's true. That passage, a favorite among Jews and Christians, is not really about faith, as I concluded. It isn't about faith at all. It's about something much more elemental. It's about hope. What do you hope for? You can't even put a name to it. You just hope. You just hope that something is going on. You just hope that life matters. You just hope that things will turn out, because the moment you fasten on a particular outcome, you will be dashed. It will not come out that way. You will be disappointed. But if we just hope something else is going on and leave it open to that, just the hope itself, that is enough. At Passover, there is a song that is sung, Dayenu. And it talks about how if God had only done this much, it would have been enough. Only this much, it would have been enough. This church, and others like it, is a Dayenu church. It's not about what we believe, it is about the fact that we hope that it is enough to hope. Hope is enough. Don't rush into faith. Don't look for doctrine or certainty. Just hope. Hope, unclothed, unformed, undefined, to whom dead gerbils and dried peas are one and the same. That even if you cut it down, it grows back, green and evergreen. Hope, undying. That's all we need. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer.